By 10 in the morning, Elena Ruiz had a line of loosened staples standing in a paper cup beside the scanner, each one bent open at the middle. The records room had no window, only a strip of borrowed light at the top of the wired glass door, and two fluorescent fixtures that made the white banker boxes look faintly green. Someone had written Flood Opaz North Basin on one lid in black marker 20 years earlier, and someone else had crossed out North when the districts were reorganized. Beside Elena's elbow lay the transfer inventory, the retention schedule, a yellow legal pad, and the old overhead scanner with its camera arm angled down over a foam cradle meant for bound material. The room smelled of paper dust, stale air conditioning, and the mild damp of files that had spent winters in a building where the heat went off at 5. The consolidation notice had given them 6 weeks to clear the lower floor. Active records to Sacramento, permanent records to the county archive after imaging, duplicates destroyed. Elena had been saying versions of those sentences into meetings for 3 months, and now at last she was alone with the work itself, which was preferable. She opened the next binder. The front cover was blue vinyl, warped at one corner. Spillway Gate Operations, APAR Jewel 1987, the typed spine label said. Inside, the first pages were forms on yellowing stock with narrow ruled columns. Date, reservoir elevation, outflow, gate setting, downstream stage, remarks. The typing sat faintly on the page. In the margins, pencil notes had been added in a smaller hand. Some were only check marks, some shifted a figure by a tenth, some changed a time. 0930. 0950. Hold here if basin stays dry. 3.2, not 3.4. Elena slid one page under the camera and brought the image up on the monitor. The scanner light flattened the paper into a pale gray field. The pencil marks came through lighter than the typed text, and she adjusted the exposure with 2 clicks until they stopped fading. She had already done water quality files from the old Oro Loma office, easement maps, fish survey notebooks that left a sweet rotting smell on her hands, no soap quite removed. These operations binders were supposed to be easier. They were newer. Most of them still matched their box lists. She lifted the next staple with the remover's little jaws, felt it give, and laid the opened pages in a stack to her right. The work had its own pace. Free the fastener. Flatten the crease. Check the binder tab against the inventory. Scan front and back if there was bleed through. Mark complete. Move on. At 11 she found the first one that made her stop. It was not dramatic on its face. A routine release table had been mimeographed onto thin white stock and inserted between daily logs for late May, when the basin was usually drafting down toward its summer target. Across the top, in the official type, the page gave reservoir elevations in half-foot bands and corresponding release timings in quarter-hour increments. Along the side, a pencil had gone through several of the printed times and moved them back 15 minutes. Not all of them, only a cluster in the middle. When in 15 became 1000. 1100 became 1045. 1145 became 1130. The hand was neat without being pretty. No initials, no date. Only the corrections themselves and, at the bottom margin, a note she had to tilt the page toward the light to read. Better carry over if snow comes off early. She set the page aside on the legal pad instead of the scanned stack. Outside the room, a cart rattled over the hall seam and went away. Somewhere farther down the floor, someone laughed in the open-plan office in the quick, apologetic way people laughed at work. Elena touched the page again, not because it was fragile, though it was, but because the note had shifted the paper out of routine. She scanned the page, entered the binder number in the metadata field, and before filing the image went to the current operations share drive. She told herself she was only checking terminology for the record description. The present-day release tables lived in a directory with cleaner names than the binders had ever had: North Basin Flood Court, seasonal targets, nightly schedule exports. The table for May opened in a spreadsheet with locked cells and color bars for operating zones. Elena was not an operator, but after 7 years in records for the Basin Authority, she had learned the nouns well enough to keep people from using the wrong ones around boxes. She scrolled to the timing column. The printed table on her screen said, Datkin 15. The page on the legal pad said, 1000. That did not mean much yet. She went back to the binder. There were 2 more pages with the same hand. A threshold moved from 3.4 to 3.2. A note in June. Hold if lower forks still under channel cap. On a daily log from 1989, a typed gate change at 0945 was arrowed to 0930. In the remarks column, somebody had written, stays off afternoon pulse this way. By noon, she had a small fan of pages on the legal pad. Not enough to prove a pattern. Enough to keep from stacking back into the binder. She ate lunch at her desk because if she left, someone would find her in the kitchen and ask where old payroll microfilm was supposed to go. The sandwich had made the paper bag damp by the time she remembered it. She read while she ate, keeping her fingers clear of the margins. The notes did not romanticize themselves. No flourishes, no names, no declarations. Only adjustments small enough to seem beneath authorship. 15 minutes, 2/10. Hold here in a dry year. Wait until the downstream gauge came off a particular number. The handwriting changed across decades. The kind of judgment did not. At 1, Mark Delaney came looking for a box. He stood in the doorway with his badge lanyard caught under one shoulder of his checked shirt, a tablet in one hand. You got the old telemetry maintenance files? He said. Depends how old you mean. Before they put the remotes on the east gates. Priya says there was a separate cabinet. Elena pointed at the shelving behind him. Second row down. Labels are wrong, but the contents aren't. Mark turned, found the cabinet, and pulled out a drawer. He was from operations analysis, which meant he spent his life among dashboards and scheduled exports and knew everybody's impatience with records until he needed one. Elena liked him well enough. He found his file box and saw the spread of pages on her desk. The glamorous stuff. Gate logs. My mistake. She held up one of the corrected tables. Do you have a minute? He came farther in, shifting the box against his hip. Elena pointed first to the typed times, then to the penciled ones. These are from late 80s ops binders, she said. Same kind of corrections over a few years. Timing shifts, threshold nudges. They don't match the official current tables. Okay, but look. She turned the monitor toward him and opened the current schedule export beside the scan. Printed table says 15 after, she said. Margin says on the hour. Right. Nightly export for the current schedule is on the hour. He looked at the screen a little longer. Could be coincidence. 3 pages so far. 3 pages is also coincident. She nodded. That was fair. She opened another scan. Then a third. The same little shifts repeated. Not everywhere. Only in a band of conditions between the wettest part of flood season and the settled logic of summer. Mark set the file box down on the floor. Where'd these come from exactly? Daily operations binders. Release tables inserted between logs. Any revision stamps? None that matter. He pinched the bridge of his nose with thumb and forefinger. The current scheduler pulls from OpsCore, he said. OpsCore got wrapped around GateReg in 2014, and GateReg inherited from whatever the district was running before that. There are manual rule sets nobody touches if they're behaving. Nobody touches them because the basin still behaves. He said it lightly, but not dismissively. A functioning system produced very little appetite for archaeology. Can you tell where a timing window came from? She asked. If it made it through 2 migrations and a rename. Not quickly. Can anybody? Priya, maybe. Elena looked back at the page on her pad. Better carry over if snow comes off early. The pencil had pressed hard enough on early to leave a slight fur in the paper. Under the scanner light, the groove showed better than the graphite. It matters to you where it came from? Mark asked. It matters that the paperwork and the system disagree, she said. I have to describe what these are before they get transferred. If the annotations are just local corrections that never went anywhere, that's one thing. If they're functionally part of the operating logic, that's another. Records answer. Exactly. Mark considered that, then glanced back at the screen. Send me the binder IDs, he said. I'll ask Priya to pull a history trace if OpsCore will cough one up. You're making that sound unlikely. OpsCore was upgraded in layers by people who believed in tomorrow more than provenance. That made her laugh once. That's almost a sentence for records. Don't quote me. It would ruin my standing. He lifted the file box again and nudged it into place against his hip. At the door he looked back. Those tables always get weird in late spring, he said. Part where the basin can't decide what year it is. After he left, the room settled around her again. Elena turned to the transfer inventory and amended the description for the box in front of her. Operations binders, spillway gate logs and release tables, annotated. She stopped, added one word, and then another. Operations binders, spillway gate logs and release tables, annotated. May reflect active constraint use. The phrase looked too assertive. She drew a line through active and replaced it with continued. For the next 2 hours she worked both sides of the room at once. Scan a page. Log a box. Open the current table. Compare the timing window. Most pages were only pages. Then another small correction would appear, and when she checked the current exports, the same SKU would still be there. At 3:30, Priya called from upstairs. Mark says you found something annoying. Elena put her on speaker and kept her hands on the page she was flattening. Depends who you ask. He sent screenshots. You're looking at the late spring offsets. That's a real thing? She said. It exists. Not in the printed table. In the scheduler. Why? One line from 2014 says preserve existing offsets pending validation. Elena looked down at the page under her hand. Where did they come from originally? No idea. There aren't comments. Not useful ones. So the current system still opens on the penciled times. It still opens on them. I know. Mark says you're trying to decide how to describe the records. I am. Describe them as operations history with annotations. That's too small. Everything is too small once it works, Priya said. Priya sent the export while they were still on the phone. By the time Elena hung up, the room had drifted toward the hour when office buildings lost their daytime grip. Vents louder, hallway thinner. The door glass reflected more of the room than it admitted from outside. She opened Priya's export beside the scan. The numbers were clean, no handwriting. 10 o'clock where the printed table elsewhere said 10:15. 10:45 where it said 11. A threshold held lower by 0.2. Elena set the old scanned page beside the keyboard. For a moment the two versions sat next to each other in the monitor glow, the old paper with its pencil groove and rust shadow where a staple had once held the corner. And the current schedule in locked cells no one had annotated because there was nowhere to write. The same adjustment lived in both. In one place it was a hand-pushing time a little earlier. In the other it was simply how the system behaved. That morning she had opened the binder and seen a marked page as one more item requiring careful handling before a move. Flatten, image, describe, box. Now the page lay beside the active schedule without asking for enlargement or sentiment. Below the dam, somewhere she could not hear from this room, the release would step when the table said to step. She touched the margin beside the penciled 1000, avoiding the graphite itself.